Hello, and welcome to the Corporate Storytime podcast series. My name is Lucas Robinson, the host of the podcast. On this pod, I'll get the opportunity to talk to ASX company leaders and innovators as they run through their personal executive journeys and the stories behind the companies they are helping to grow today. I'll be leveraging my experience as a former stockbroker and my current role with investor relations consultancy, Corporate Storytime. But enough of that. For now, let's gather round, come in close, and let me tell you a story.
Thanks again for listening into the Corporate Storytime podcast. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Ian Rodger, the CEO of Jindalee Lithium, which trades on the ASX under the code JLL. Jindalee has been a listed entity since 2002, yet remarkably has just 60 million shares on issue. Today, Jindalee is focused on the advancement of the company's 100% owned McDermott Lithium project located in Oregon, United States. The McDermott Lithium project already hosts the largest lithium resource in the US, with a mineral resource estimate of 21.5 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent, and is strategically located on the doorstep of America's auto industry, which is rapidly transitioning towards the production of battery electric vehicles. Ian, welcome to you, mate. Before we get into the specifics of the project, why don't you explain the unique funding and regulatory benefits Jindalee enjoys in the US as a future supplier of battery-grade lithium?
Thanks for having me, Lucas. The US obviously has a big push towards reshoring the supply of a lot of critical minerals, particularly those that are dominated by China. Obviously, China dominates the lithium chemical market and the battery cell manufacturing. So a big key thrust of the Inflation Reduction Act, but also a range of other legislation actually has acted to sort of incentivize the build out of those supply chains. And there's a range of incentives available for operations. There's tax credits that offset some of the OPEX for mines located in the US, but more materially for us, there's a range of grant funding opportunities, so non-dilutionary funding sources that we've really stretched the equity dollars. And then there's a range of loan programs that stretch into the billions of dollars. And there's been our near neighbor in the US is a project called Thacker Pass. It's owned by a company called Lithium Americas. They're sort of circa $1 billion company, and they've just secured a $2.3 billion US construction loan from the US government at very attractive rates over almost a quarter of a century. So there's a range of factors that really make it an attractive place to operate.
Yeah, and obviously the US government is trying to wean themselves off Chinese supply for battery-grade chemicals. Talk a little bit more about the IRA. I mean, I know people have heard of it, but maybe it was a couple of years ago that it was first announced by the Biden administration. Exactly what sort of pot of money is available there for these, green technology projects such as McDermott?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a range. It's quite an extensive act. What is most relevant to Jindalee is what's called Section 45X, which it provides a 10% operating cost credit to projects that are operating in the US and producing certain critical minerals. So that's really material to the operating costs. There's a range of subsidies as well that indirectly that really, I guess, assist domestic product production, I should say, through basically providing subsidies and incentives for battery cell manufacturing and sourcing product from friendly sources, including obviously domestic sources. The Act also enabled, I guess, some funding for some of these grant programs that I talked about, run through the Department of Defence and Energy, but they're also linked to, I guess, some other laws. So it's not as clear cut.
Yeah, so it trickles down from the IRA into different departments within US government administration. Yeah, that sort of makes sense. I mean, you talked about Lithium Americas and the Thacker Pass project. Both of the McDermott project and Thacker Pass are located on the McDermott caldera. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as a source of lithium mineralisation globally, the significance of it?
Yeah, certainly. McDermott caldera, it's a sedimentary, used to be a lake. So the lithium, is in these units, which were sort of formed sediments on the bottom of a, previous caldera lake. It contains, the whole caldera is obviously enriched with lithium to some degree. And so there's they're the two largest lithium deposits in North America. We're at one end, they're down the other. They're very similar in styles of mineralization because of, in the same lake. There is some differences though. Theirs is higher grade and have two species of clay, and while ours is slightly lower grade, but a single clay species. And but there's a whole lot of additional lithium there that we're sure that hasn't been discovered yet. It's really truly a large graded deposit of lithium.
Yeah, I know there's been some academic research out supporting that theory and even suggesting that the caldera is perhaps the largest known deposit of lithium anywhere in the world. So you've got a lot of upside there. And my understanding is that being clay hosted and shallow, the idea of this being a bulk, low-cost sort of mining operation is really appealing. Also, just on Thacker Pass, you talked about the fact that they had that US Department of Energy funding in place. Talk about their strategic partnership and offtake with General Motors as well. I suppose that's a fairly good guiding light for where you want to take the McDermott project.
Yeah, for sure. General Motors is Lithium America's largest shareholder. There's a sort of a two-stage agreement where they'll put in up to, I think it's US $560 million in equity in Lithium America as a listed company. They've put in the first tranche, and the second tranche, is contingent on a few things, including closing out this loan. So it's a real, I think they've done a fantastic job, over the last couple of years of de-risking their flow sheet, providing the confidence, that's required to get through these DD processes. They've got a large technical centre in Reno that they've really, piloted their flow sheet for, a number of years and got through these hurdles and attracted the investment from, some of the biggest car manufacturers in the world. So it's a real stamp of endorsement for, I guess, the broader clay deposits, given that there's no clay, lithium deposits that are currently in production today. Lithium Americas will be the first. And so they've done a really great job paving the way. And in a lot of ways, we've leveraged their learnings. I guess our flow sheet will look very similar to theirs. There is some differences in the deposit, but we can really leverage their experience and also leverage the interest that they've generated in the space. Not too long ago, not many groups in the downstream really understood the clays, and they've done a lot of work in that space and really helped educate the broader market. So we're the beneficiaries of that for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, it is good to have a group down the road like Lithium Americas developing Thacker Pass and really blazing the trail and showing the way for a group like Jindalee, who have got a very similar project located so nearby. And I suppose the other source of inspiration for Lithium Americas is the fact that I know you mentioned they had a $1 billion market capitalization. That is $1 billion US, right? Versus, the Jindalee market capitalization at the moment, which is sort of a fair way under that. And so the disconnect there is something that we can aspire to, seeing some catch up when the McDermott project, becomes more fully advanced. I mean, the other thing you mentioned there on Thacker Pass was the metallurgical process that they go through to extract the clay hosted lithium ore and turn it into a battery grade chemical. I can imagine that will be another really good guiding light and guide point for you as you enter into, over the course of the next 12 months, some fairly critical studies on the flow sheet and test work. Just explain where you're at with that at the moment from the chemistry point of view of converting this into battery grade lithium carbonate.
Certainly. Like I said before, we're sort of we started the PFS the middle of last year. We quite deliberately chose Fluor as a engineer, given their experience with Ioneer. They're the lead engineer for Rhyolite Ridge, which is another advanced sedimentary, clay-hosted deposit. And they're also quite familiar with the Thacker Pass flow sheet and deposit through a couple of different avenues. And so we set out on a PFS last year and included sort of a flow sheet design that was very similar to Lithium Americas. And so we've now, a bulk of the way through that test work. Really, the flow sheet consists of two elements. One is a beneficiation, where essentially it's very soft clay-based ore, so sort of washing it, taking the fine fraction, losing some of the mass, but keeping most of the lithium, and then leaching that into solution before dropping out a couple of the metals that we don't need to leave lithium carbonate that's then purified. And so we've done, I guess, what the engineers think is, the more high risk part of the flow sheet, or the areas that had the highest degree of uncertainty in terms of the beneficiation, and the performance was very pleasing. We're getting a lot of the lithium out at a reasonably large coarse grain size. And then the leach performance also has been very very positive, getting a lot of lithium out at reasonable acid consumptions. And we've really learnt a lot through that process, and it's really surprised to the upside. At the moment, we're currently working through the tail end of the test work that takes basically the leachate through to lithium carbonate. And we hope to produce a battery grade lithium product around the middle of the year. So we're pretty excited about that. And, that'll be a real sort of milestone for us.
Yeah, and that'll all feed into the PFS, which is due out later this year.
Correct.
What are the other sort of elements that are key to that?
Well, I guess the bit is really the mine planning. Like I said, we sort of leveraged a lot of the work that was previously done from our peers in terms of sedimentary deposits, and we've worked through the test program, but also, I guess, the engineering. We've sort of learnt a lot along the way, and one of the key takeaways was, the zones of higher grade mineralization in the deposit, and those areas of high grade have even more a favourable metallurgical performance. And so, we're pulling all that work together now and trying to understand, what that means for the size of the plant and whatnot. So the mine planning piece has been a real key. The deposit, it's unusual in that it's very low strip ratio. It's huge. So you run a pit shell and it's like, we haven't decided on the final limits yet, but it's like somewhere between 50 and 100 and something years mine life. And so then there's a whole lot of embedded optionality because the stripping is so low. The project is not that sensitive to any high grading strategy. It's actually adds a lot of value. So we're working through how best to incorporate, the mine plan.
And I know that there's a relationship with POSCO from a processing point of view as well, or the studies into the met work. What's happening there?
We entered into an MOU with POSCO last year. They've currently got some sample and running a range of different tests. We hope, to have some of those results in the middle of the year. But essentially, they're running a series of tests that look at that are similar to what we've done, and then they're also looking at some of their own, unique processing methods that might add further value. So it's really a technical collaboration. There is no, it really is just that, and then an agreement to sort of, sit down at the end of it and decide what's next.
And as I understand it, POSCO are sort of funding a lot of that work out of their own pockets.
Yeah, all their test work it has been funded by themselves, and they've, as we get through the PFS, there'll be increasingly some information sharing and collaboration to collectively take the project forward. Yeah,
great. Well, why don't we talk about some of the people involved in the company and the background of the business? I know I was speaking to founding director, Lindsay Dudfield. he regards this as being the project that's come along in the company's 22-year life that he considers to be a company maker. But along the way, there's been lots of other projects and different commodities that the company's been associated with, and spin-outs and demergers that have generated substantial shareholder value. Why don't you talk a little bit about the background of the company and the people involved? I suppose you can start with Lindsay, and also talk a little bit about Wayne Zekulich, the sort of recently appointed non-executive chairman, as sort of two of the key people on the board.
Sure. Jindalee's been around, as you sort of said earlier, for circa 22 odd years, IPO'd in 2002, and very unusual for a junior mining company. Didn't raise equity for sort of 17 odd years because they generated value through the project generator model, trading assets. And they've even paid a special dividend through the energy metals transaction a number of years ago. I won't get into, I guess, a couple of their wins, but clearly they've generated a lot of value over time, and really proved themselves. And I guess Lindsay's been the founder and the key to that over time of a quality steward of shareholder capital, and our shareholder register reflects that. There's a lot of people that have followed Lindsay for a long period of time, and are supporters of the company, and we're sort of very grateful for that. But I think the strategy has always been to find a company making asset, and as you sort of alluded to, we certainly think we have in McDermott. That's what's attracted me to join the organisation, and last year, after announcing what is the biggest resource in North America, quite a deliberate change, a shift in strategy in terms of building the capability internally to go from explorer into developer. And I joined in January. I can talk a bit to my background, but Wayne also joined around the same time as a new chairman. Wayne's got a long track record in the finance space as a CFO, as a senior investment banker. He's financed some really large projects, and has been around a lot of transactions. So he brings a good experience, given that that's going to be a key focus for McDermott and Jindalee as we go forward.
Yeah, and I was going to get to your background. I know that you've spent time on the technical side professionally, and also in the corporate world. So you sort of walk both sides of that street. Talk to us a little bit about where you came from and how you came to take on this opportunity.
Yeah, my background, I'm a mining engineer originally. I cut my teeth at Rio Tinto across two large greenfield mine developments before sort of switching into investment merchant banking in London and Sydney. Most recently, I was at Oz Minerals as project director of West Musgrave Province. And I guess most relevant, I was looking after, a downstream nickel project, which was looking at taking their nickel concentrate from West Musgrave and producing an intermediate battery product, and also trying to look at partnership opportunities by bringing someone in to participate as a minority shareholder in the whole project, and really provide an alternative to BHP in terms of smelting. So ultimately, we got taken over by BHP in the end, and so I was really keen to after a screen of opportunities, looking for assets that I think that there's a lot of value to be had, and that have the sort of size and scale. That's how I sort of stumbled across Lindsay and I guess the former chairman Justin, and over a couple of months got to know the guys here and potentially the asset, and end up joining early this year.
Yeah, well, it's a good time to be getting into this project. One of the slides that you've put out in a recent presentation suggests that there's currently in the mineral resource estimate enough lithium for the construction of 900 million electric vehicles, which I just find absolutely astounding. It really puts it into perspective well. So this is clearly, as Lindsay has said, the company making asset that he's been waiting so long for. I suppose the lithium market, and I wouldn't mind getting your take on that. It's been up and down and all over the place, and more recently sort of showing some good signs of life that it's bouncing again. This is a long-term project, as you said, the potential for a 50 to 100-year sort of project. So you'll ride through all of the cycles, but where do you see it going, I suppose, with sort of funding requirements in mind over the next couple of years for Jindalee?
Yeah, look, I think obviously the near-term softness has been sort of driven by, destocking and a bit of surplus oversupply. But, depending on the forecast you look at, there's varying size of deficits towards the end of the decade. And even with some of the softer EV rollouts, et cetera, that deficit is still huge, and really is, aligns well with, I guess, the timeline for McDermott. And I think, what's often lost, if you read the Reuters headlines and whatnot around, General Motors missing their EV targets or whatever, is that what you're seeing, what you're reading in the newspaper isn't what's actually happening. Certainly from our engagement with OEMs and people in the industry, is that it's really end of the decade when the rubber's going to hit the road, and there's a lot of activity, under the surface in terms of gearing up for that. The OEMs are sort of building out cheaper models in their product offerings. I mean, Tesla included. The groups are sort of building out teams and, looking to over that 5 to 10 year horizon on how they're actually going to get those lithium units, I should say, into their supply chain. So I think it's really positive for us in terms of market timing. There is going to be a lot of up and downs along the way. The lithium market's only 1 million tons, lithium carbonate equivalent, as of last year. And we expect to be, depending on the numbers, like 3 million tons by the end of the decade. That's some pretty impressive growth. There's going to be some growing pains along the way, and hopefully, the ups and downs get, the magnitude of those, cycles, hopefully, become smaller, and, we see an upward trajectory in price without the sort of wild volatility to make sort of the investment thesis, a much more solid going forward. So, we're encouraged by what we're seeing, and we think that the timing of this project's going to be rock solid.
Yeah, well, not just the timing, the location. I mean, you can't put a price on that when you're on the doorstep of, US's auto industry, and they're going hell for leather and have got all that government funding to try and make sure that they internalise and have a domestic battery chemical supply chain. So the fact that you're sitting there in the US with the largest deposit in the US, there's just so many strategic advantages that are obvious.
No, it's sort of like there's been a lot more activity in the US, sort of building out gigafactories. I mean, we drive past, what blew me away when we went to site last month was, driving past the Tesla gigafactory on the way up from Reno. There's a lot of being to build out of the downstream, but the elephant in the room is where's the lithium units going to come from? So that gives us confidence that, the money will, increasingly flow to the, our end of the supply chain. So yeah, it's pretty bullish. I'm excited.
Oh, good on you, mate. Well, that's a good place to finish, I think. Thanks very much for joining us. That was a really good overview of what you're trying to achieve there in the US at the McDermott Lithium Project. It's super exciting to have such a big deposit so close to those key markets. So, I think there's a lot ahead of you, and I think 2024 is going to be a big year.
Well, thanks for having me, Lucas. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Storytime podcast. We're really trying to build our audience for the podcast and aim to deliver regular episodes of our chats with executives from some of the ASX's most interesting companies. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends, follow the podcast and give us a like wherever you download it. And if you have any feedback, please drop us a line at info@corporatestorytime.com. Thanks and all the best.